Cold does something to a trigger finger that no training manual ever quite prepares you for. Corporal Rosa Delgado can feel hers going numb inside a glove rated for -40 degrees, watching a shape the size of a small house grind closer through falling snow, 60 meters out, maybe less. The Javelin's seeker head is already locked. Her thumb is on the switch. And somewhere behind that shape, in the white-gray murk of a forest that hasn't seen a clear sky in 4 days, more shapes are moving that she can't count and doesn't have the ammunition left to fight one at a time. 22 hours ago, this war didn't exist yet. Not for her, not for anyone wearing the uniform she's wearing. Late December, and the town of Bastogne sits at the center of 7 roads through the Ardennes forest, like a wheel hub with no spokes left attached to anything. Inside a ring drawn tight around it, roughly 11,000 men of the American 101st Airborne Division dug into frozen foxholes, most without white winter gear, some without enough ammunition to last another full day. All of them cut off from resupply, reinforcement, or retreat since the ring closed 6 days earlier. Outside that ring, elements of 4 German divisions, Panzerlehr and the 2nd Panzer among them, backed by columns of Tiger and Panther tanks that have already smashed through everything else standing between this forest and the River Meuse. The weather has grounded every Allied aircraft for nearly a week straight. No fighters, no bombers, no supply drops, nothing but gray fog and snow that seems to have made a private arrangement with the German advance to keep American eyes blind for as long as possible. 3 days from now, a German officer under a white flag will walk into the American lines and deliver a written demand for surrender. The American commander's reply, when it comes, will be a single word that outlives every general on either side of this war. Nobody in the perimeter knows that yet. Right now, all anyone inside that ring knows is that the food is running low, the wounded are freezing faster than the medics can treat them, and the tanks keep coming. 22 hours before Delgado's thumb finds that switch, a Marine winter warfare detachment, 100 strong, running a routine cold weather training rotation through the same Ardennes forest 79 years later, is mid-air over that same stretch of pine and snow when the storm around their transport simply stops behaving like a storm. It happens without drama. No blue light, no tearing sky, just visibility collapsing from a mile to nothing in under 4 seconds, a wall of white pressing against every window at once, and a silence in the cockpit headsets that shouldn't be possible, with 2 working radios and a satellite uplink that was solid 90 seconds earlier. Comms are dead, the pilot reports, flat, controlled, the particular calm of someone refusing to let panic into his voice yet. GPS just threw an error I've never seen. We need to set down. Now. They set down hard on a forest road that wasn't supposed to be there, in a whiteout that clears, abruptly, completely, like a curtain yanked back, onto a landscape that makes absolutely no sense against the sectional charts still glowing uselessly on the cockpit displays. There is no highway. There is no farmhouse with a satellite dish. There is a burned-out half-track sitting 40 meters off the nose, snow drifted against its dead engine, and beyond it, dug into the tree line in shallow scrapes barely deep enough to call foxholes. Men in olive-drab uniforms far too thin for this cold, staring back at the Marines with the exhausted, hollow-eyed disbelief of soldiers who have already run out of things that can still surprise them. Captain L.S. Nakamura climbs down from the aircraft first, sidearm holstered, hands visible, boots crunching into snow that feels wrong somehow, too deep, too undisturbed by the kind of vehicle traffic a modern training range would leave behind. A sergeant from the dug-in line approaches at a wary crouch, carbine up, breath fogging hard in air cold enough to hurt the lungs. He takes in the aircraft, the strange white and gray camouflage, nothing like anything issued in his own war. The rifles that look like nothing that's ever come off any assembly line he's seen. "You with Patton?" he asks, voice cracked from cold and exhaustion. It's the only explanation his brain seems willing to offer for strangers dropping out of a blizzard. "No," Nakamura says. "I don't know who's with Patton right now. I don't even know what year it is for you people. And I need you to not shoot us while we figure that out together." The sergeant's eyes drop to Nakamura's rifle, then back to his face, calculating something that clearly isn't adding up on either side. Whatever internal argument he's having with himself, it ends the way it usually ends for men who have spent a week surrounded and are running low on reasons to turn away help. "Command post this way," he says. "General's going to want to see this for himself. Inside the perimeter, word travels fast it's something impossible just landed in the forest, and Nakamura spends the next hour doing math that has nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with survival. Because the numbers his platoon actually has are numbers this frozen war was never going to hand him a second chance to fix. 100 Marines. Each carries a standard combat load of 210 rounds for a rifle built 79 years after the guns freezing solid in foxholes around them. 10,500 rounds total across the platoon, and not one more coming, ever, from any resupply drop in any weather. 4 M240 machine guns round out the heavy weapons, 2,000 rounds apiece to start. And then there's the number that actually matters here, the one number that turns this from a survival story into something with teeth. 6. 6 Javelin missile systems, 6 shots total. Each one a weapon built from the ground up, decades from now, for exactly one purpose: killing tanks. Heavy armor. The kind of steel that laughs at a rifle round and shrugs off anything short of a direct artillery hit. There are, encircling this town right now, more tanks than anyone in this cold, exhausted perimeter has bothered to count precisely, because counting them stopped being useful days ago. Best estimate from the division's own intelligence, somewhere north of 150 armored vehicles within striking distance of this sector alone, backed by tens of thousands of infantry across 4 divisions. 6 rounds built to kill tanks. 150 tanks that want this town by Christmas, Nakamura says over the platoon net, breath clouding in air cold enough to feel like inhaling glass. Run that math yourselves and tell me in the comments if 6 was ever going to cover it. There's a second problem nobody trained for, and it's not going to show up on any ammunition count. The cold itself is a weapon here, indifferent to which side it's aimed at. Lithium battery packs rated for 6 hours of continuous operation in temperate conditions are already reading closer to 3 in air this far below freezing. Hydraulic seals on vehicles never designed for this kind of sustained sub-zero exposure stiffen and crack. 2 Humvees came through with the transport, fuel enough for maybe 8 hours of real maneuvering before the tanks run dry, assuming the engines don't seize first in the kind of cold that's already turning exposed metal painful to touch through gloves. Nakamura makes the first hard call before the sun goes down. Rather than distributing the 6 Javelins evenly along the perimeter the way doctrine would suggest, he concentrates 4 of them at the single road junction the German armor has hit hardest for 3 straight days, betting that killing the momentum of the main armored push matters more than spreading thin protection across every possible approach. Would you have massed every anti-tank round at the one road the enemy keeps using, or spread them out to cover every direction at once? The first real test comes before dawn, when a company of German infantry, Volksgrenadiers, Hastily equipped conscripts and battle-worn veterans mixed together in gray-green winter smocks over field-gray wool, coal scuttle helmets rimed white with frost, carrying Carabiner 98K rifles and belt-fed MG-42 machine guns slung across their shoulders, probes forward through the tree line to test whatever new defenders the burned-out half-track's crew reported seeing. Among them is a private named Dieter, 19 years old, drafted only weeks earlier from a training depot that never finished training him properly, carrying a rifle his father used in a different war. He has heard rumors overnight about strange soldiers glimpsed near the road junction, dismissed by his sergeant as American paratrooper reinforcements, nothing his unit hasn't already bled through a dozen times this week. He believes it, right up until the tree line in front of him erupts with a sound that outpaces anything he's ever heard a machine gun manage, a continuous, unbroken roar. Imagine, for one impossible second, the fastest MG-42 he's ever fired, doubled in speed, and never once pausing to feed a new belt. Dieter watches the veteran beside him, a man who survived Stalingrad's retreat and thought nothing in this forest could still frighten him. Simply drop, punched sideways into the snow with no warning shot, no muzzle flash he can find to aim back at. He drops flat on pure animal instinct and does not move again until the probe breaks and scrambles back into the tree line, leaving a dozen men behind in snow already turning red. 100 Marines, 0 casualties. Ammunition expended, just under 300 rounds. And somewhere back at the German regimental command post, word is already reaching officers who have run out of patience for this sector's continued failure to fall. Sitrep, 100 Marines standing, ammunition at 97%, 6 Javelins untouched in reserve. The probe is broken, but an army that has already ground through Poland, France, and half of Russia does not stay confused about a single bad morning for very long. The German response, when it arrives that afternoon, is not another probe. It's the real thing, a coordinated, armored push. 4 Panther tanks advancing in a staggered line down the road junction, with infantry sheltering close behind their hulls, using the tanks themselves as moving cover, the way this war's veterans have learned to do against exactly the kind of automatic fire that broke this morning's assault. Nakamura recognizes the tactic immediately. Infantry hugging armor close enough that machine gun fire meant for the soft targets risks hitting nothing but steel, forcing every kill to come from precision fire around the tank's flanks, instead of suppression across the whole formation. It's smart, it's costly to counter, and it's exactly the situation 4 Javelins were pre-positioned for. The first missile launches with a sound unlike anything else in this forest, a soft cough of a launch motor, then a violent whoosh as the flight motor kicks in mid-arc, climbing before diving down onto the lead Panther's thinner top armor in a strike that turns 70 tons of German engineering into a fireball visible from half a mile away. It is, Nakamura will note later, with the kind of dark humor that only makes sense to soldiers who've spent a career studying exactly this weapon's intended purpose, almost funny. A missile built decades from now, in a doctrine written specifically to counter exactly this kind of armor, finally meeting the very tank silhouette its own designers studied to build it. Somewhere, a long-dead German engineer who spent years perfecting Panther armor plating would probably not appreciate the irony. 2 more Panthers died at Javelins before the assault breaks and reverses, infantry scattering back into the tree line without their armored cover, leaving 1 Javelin still in reserve at the junction and 3 now expended for good. Sitrep, 100 Marines standing. Ammunition at 91%. 3 Javelins remaining. 3 Panther tanks destroyed. 0 Marine casualties. Somewhere behind German lines, officers are recalculating a plan that has just lost a third of the armor committed to this sector in a single afternoon. By nightfall, the cold has stopped being background noise and started being the actual battle. Battery packs on the platoon's night vision systems, drained faster than any spec sheet promised in air this far below zero, began failing in staggered waves through the evening hours, forcing Marines to fight blind, or near blind, against a tree line the Germans know infinitely better than they do. One of the 2 Humvees' engine block cracked from cold that punched straight through antifreeze rated for conditions nowhere near this brutal, goes dead permanently, stranding a quarter of the platoon's mobility in the snow. Weapons themselves start acting strange. Lubricant gone thick and sluggish, action cycling rougher. One M240 developing an intermittent stoppage that its gunner has to clear with hands numb enough that he can barely feel the charging handle under his fingers. We've got more gear failing from the cold tonight than from anything the Germans have thrown at us all day, the platoon sergeant reports, and there's a flat, exhausted humor buried in how he says it. Command, for the record, history's worst army might not be the one currently shooting at us. It might just be December. Nobody laughs outright, but it needed saying, because admitting the cold is winning matters more right now than pretending it isn't. Sit rep. 98 Marines fully combat effective. 2 treated for early frostbite. Ammunition at 83%. 2 Javelins remaining. 1 Humvee dead. Night vision capability down to roughly 40% of the platoon. And somewhere out in the dark tree line, German artillery has started a slow, methodical bombardment, clearly meant to soften the junction for one more push before dawn. The final push comes just before first light, and it comes with everything the German command has left to commit to this one stubborn stretch of road. Tiger tanks this time, heavier and better armored than the Panthers that died here yesterday, backed by infantry that has clearly been ordered to close the distance no matter what it costs, driven forward by officers who have run entirely out of patience for a single road junction refusing to fall to an army that has already broken far stronger lines than this one. Delgado's Javelin, the last one of the junction, the only anti-armor round left standing between the lead Tiger and a gap in the line that would open the entire sector wide, locks onto a target close enough now that the missile's minimum engagement range is barely a technicality rather than a comfortable margin. This is the exact moment the flash forward promised. This is the frozen glove, the numb thumb, the shape the size of a small house grinding closer through falling snow. Nakamura's voice comes through the radio, calm despite everything. Delgado, take the shot. She takes it. The missile's top attack profile arcs briefly skyward before diving down through the Tiger's weakest point, and the resulting explosion throws burning debris 30 meters in every direction, cooking off the tank's own ammunition in a secondary blast that levels most of the surrounding tree line. The infantry advancing behind it, caught in the open without armor to shelter against, breaks apart under sustained machine gun fire from a line that has, against every reasonable expectation for this weather and this ammunition count, refused to stop firing. Sit rep. 94 Marines still fighting. 6 wounded. 1 dead. The platoon's first fatality of the entire engagement. Lance Corporal Theo Marsh, killed by German artillery fire during the final push. Ammunition remaining, 19%. 0 Javelins left. The German assault is breaking, not building, And for the first time in 6 days, this stretch of road junction is not the sector the enemy chooses to keep pressing. Dawn arrives over Bastogne on a perimeter that has, against every prediction anyone made a week earlier, not collapsed. 3 days later, in the version of this siege that history already recorded before any of this happened, a German officer under a white flag delivers a written ultimatum demanding total surrender of the American garrison. The American general's reply? One word scrawled across the bottom of that same document becomes one of the most quoted lines in the history of this war. In this altered version of the same week, that reply gets delivered exactly as it always was, because the general giving it never needed saving, only reinforcing. And reinforcement is precisely what one road junction full of exhausted, frost-bitten strangers just proved capable of providing. Relief arrives from the south 2 days sooner than history recorded. Armored spearheads from Patton's Third Army punching through a German line that has been bled thinner, faster, and more expensively than the original timeline ever allowed, thanks to 6 missiles that arrived 79 years ahead of the war they were built to fight in. The cost sits heavy on every survivor standing at that junction when the relief column finally breaks through. Lance Corporal Marsh does not get to see it. 6 more Marines carry wounds serious enough to need care in Ardennes Forest in 1944 has no real way to provide, kept alive on field medicine and stubbornness alone until real evacuation becomes possible. The sergeant who met them in the snow finds Nakamura near the smoking wreckage of the last Tiger, staring at armor that outweighs anything either of them will ever describe accurately to anyone who wasn't there to see it burn. "You didn't come here to save this war," the sergeant says slowly, still working through a week his own mind hasn't finished processing. "But you kept this piece of it from ending different." "That's usually the whole job," Nakamura answers. "Didn't feel like much of a victory standing in it, though." There's no celebration in the churned, blood-dark snow around the junction. There's only the flat exhaustion of men who held a line the cold nearly took before the Germans could, and the quiet, permanent knowledge of exactly what one name on that list cost to make the difference. The storm that brought them returns 3 days later, the same wall of sudden, impossible whiteout closing in around the same stretch of forest road. Nakamura's platoon, 94 strong, 1 fewer than it landed with, 6 wounded on stretchers lashed to whatever transport the perimeter can spare, loads back aboard an aircraft that has no business still being flight-worthy after everything it's weathered, and the whiteout swallows them whole, exactly as suddenly as it first appeared. Because the road junction holds 2 days earlier than history ever recorded, the ripple spreads outward through the entire remaining campaign in ways no after-action report from the real war ever anticipated. German armor bled dry chasing one stubborn intersection reaches the relief effort's flank with less strength left to resist it, and the breakout that historically cost thousands of additional casualties over the following week instead closes faster, cheaper, and with fewer names added to a list that was already long enough before any of this happened. The famous one-word reply still gets written into history exactly as it always was. But the men who received reinforcement to make that defiance possible got 2 fewer days of freezing, starving, and dying to earn it. Somewhere in a modern Marine Corps winter warfare archive, a training exercise log exists describing an unexplained 22-hour gap during a routine cold weather rotation, an aircraft manifest showing fuel and munitions expenditures that don't match any range this century, and one name on a memorial nobody currently serving can fully account for. No one who reads that file will ever believe where he actually died. Sometimes the thing that almost breaks you isn't the enemy at all. Sometimes it's just the weather. patient and indifferent, waiting to see which side runs out of resolve first. What last stand should we rewrite next? Should American paratroopers hold a wall the ancient world insists could never fall twice? Or should a company of rangers stand where 10,000 men once had no name left to be remembered by? Drop your wildest scenario in the comments. Hit that hype button to help this video reach more people. Subscribe for the next battlefield, and I'll see you in the snow.